Hi guys, Bob here, and I hope you're all having a good holiday period. So this video is about tips and tricks and thoughts. I did a recent drawing and I've been using my new tablet that I've got, but let's get straight into this. We've got 29 tips to get through. So tip 1 is to choose a good reference, which I've talked about many times before, and this reference was taken from Pexels, which is a copyright-free website, thanks to Pixabay, who provided this photograph. Tip 2, start with some basic guides. You can measure, trace, or use the reference image guides tool, which is available in Rebelle 7, to get us a good starting point. Tip 3 is there's hard lines and soft lines, and you need to find out what you're trying to achieve. Are you trying to get a smooth transition, or are you trying to show a hard edge? Again, I've talked about this many times. Tip 4, when you're doing portraits, is bone structure. You're looking at how the light hits the bones that come through the surface of the skin. Focusing here on the neck, and this you can see from our reference image, we can see we're trying to look at the light in the dark areas. Tip 5, Rebelle 7 comes with structures, and I really wanted to experiment with them while drawing this new piece. You can see this pattern, which is one of the default library structures that we can choose from, and it gives this nice effect. Tip 6, we also have the liquify tool still available to us, brought into us through Rebelle 6, which can help us fix some of our proportions if we don't think they are right. Tip 7 is light and shadow of hair. With a good brush, it can really help you not get frustrated when you're not getting the results that you want. Traditional artists use these types of techniques with different brushes and objects such as sponges, like when they're doing clouds, for example. So don't be afraid to use textures, don't be afraid to check out all the brushes that are available to us. Tip 8 is experiment. There are many examples of where experiments have taught me something new. I tried to use my drawing here to make a new structure using my drawing and to see if I could get some cool effects. It didn't work out in this case, but that's the kind of tests that you need to do, and not all of them will work out. Some of them will, some of them won't, but don't be afraid to experiment. Tip 9, Rebelle 7 comes with these fantastic metal paints, which I have discussed in a previous video, but these are certainly worth messing around, especially with water, so give them a go. Tip 10, use the eraser. To get nice sharp edges to something, it's one of the best tools that we've got is the eraser, and we can get really lovely shapes. And the good thing about Rebelle is basically every brush that we have can be turned into an eraser through choosing the icon as shown. Tip 11, turn any brush into a blender and you can get some magical results and textures which simply painting wouldn't provide. You can't just paint every little brush stroke. You could if you want to, but that's not how traditional artists do it either. So don't be afraid to find a brush or blender that really brings out texture into your painting. Tip 12, reflections in the eyes, on the nose, on the cheekbones will really bring your painting to life. Not for all situations, but even dark reflections are needed, as you will see later with the dress folds. We need dull reflections of light, but they are what give us our values and provide a depth to our painting or drawing. Tip 13, play around with the perspective tools. I thought about going down a city background, but I abandoned the idea. But who knows, you might find that that works for your piece, but definitely play around with those perspective tools because they can bring a lot to a painting. Tip 14, details. The smallest details can matter significantly. Sometimes a feature of a face can be slightly off and mess up the whole image. I struggle with this quite a lot, especially when it comes to the pupils of the eyes. Tip 15, sometimes we can go too far with a drawing, and I think maybe the case with this drawing is that I went too far. You haven't seen the final result yet, which is coming later in the video, but perhaps I should have kept this point in the painting as my finishing pose, and looking back through the videos I realised I really liked this point, and there are a few things I would need to fix about the painting, but ultimately this looks like a good pose, a good image that I would be happy with in retrospect. Thankfully, I stage save, so I have this point available to go back and perhaps create a second version of this painting. Tip 16, structures again. At this point I was messing around with structures and it is actually hard to tell which is better. Structures give a certain edge feathering, however a solid shape perhaps is what I should have been using, and I would get that through using the stencil tool, for example. I did a video a while back on stencils and how to use them, and I'll leave a link to that video at the end of this video. Also, if you're enjoying these tips so far, consider subscribing, but if you hit the like button, that really helps and is appreciated. Tip 17, objects going behind a character. This was a tip I received moons ago, many moons ago, from a friend called Art by Galen. You'll find his YouTube channel, he does a comic, for example. So this as well as working on a Star Wars drawing, but to provide depth to an image, it's a good idea to have some feature cutting behind your central focus. In this case, it was a big gold stripe. Tip 18, water and metallic paints are really fun to mess around with. Give it a go, you'll love it. Tip 19, to get the metallic look, you might need to add a layer on top. You can add an overlay layer, you can add a dodge layer, you can add a subtract layer. And if you mess around with these layers, sometimes you'll get results that you're looking for. You can also use the markers tools, the burn and the dodge tools, to get some of that dark metallic look on the metallic paint. Tip 20, proportions matter with regards to realism, or if you're looking for an anime or a manga drawing, then usually the eyes are a different size, for example, large eyes, small noses. Keep that in mind, especially with realistic portrait drawing. The age of the person can also be determined by the spacing of the facial features. Tip 21, bounce light. We need to remember that even if we have one light source, there will be a certain amount of light which will bounce back to the underside of something, to the chin, to the bottom of the hair, as we can see here. We can show the light bouncing back from the skin and other objects and hitting the hair. Tip 22, be bold with what you're drawing. For me, a lot of the early artists I encountered were people who were striving for a realistic looking drawing. And I do like that, but at the same time when a drawing or painting just looks like a photograph, I look at it and I love the skill involved, but that's not my goal. Certainly not at this point in my learning am I trying to achieve like hyper realistic drawing. So remember to draw what makes you happy, whether it be anime, manga type drawings, or in the case of my example here, there's a bit of a mixture of some realism with some abstract and sometimes some landscape, which I'll put into some of my other drawings. Tip 23, sometimes it's nice to see what your artwork would look like if it was a game or a movie poster, so get some of those templates and overlay them for a bit of fun. In this case I have made my imaginary game called Killjoy for the PlayStation 1. Tip 24, not sure this is tip 24 as we're talking structures again. Whether it be the Empire State Building or graffiti, it can really help add some texture to your drawing without having to draw graffiti, for example. Again, real artists can use these tools as well. A lot of them have stencils or literally cut out newspaper cuttings and attach them to their art. Tip 25, structures to provide material detail. Is this tip 25? Structures again, structures to provide material detail. In this case, we're looking at lace. And again, I found this image on Pexels. Tip 26, the clone tool. Again, I've talked about this before, but it can lead to some interesting results. Tip 27, in digital art, your drawing doesn't need to stay still. It's a journey. And although I like the end product that we're seeing here, I did like those earlier versions, and that's the beauty of the digital painting, is we can save stage. So completing all of these journeys, completing the full journey, although I probably preferred my earlier version, the journey has taught me things that I can then carry forward into my future projects. Tip 28, do the time-lapse recording when drawing. You can then walk through it afterwards, and as our memories are not that great, sometimes we forget how we got to a certain point in time or a certain point in our painting, and having the time-lapse allows us to go back through and we can see how we've managed to achieve a particular thing. I use OBS for recording all of my drawing process, and again I can go back and see which buttons I clicked and so on and so forth. Tip 29 is not a tip, but just to say thanks for watching. I wish you all the best for 2024, and Wee Bob is out.